On today's episode of the Virginia Investor Podcast, we sit down with someone whose story defies statistics, expectations, and every label ever placed on her. Wendy Coles did not enter real estate from a place of comfort or privilege. She fought her way into it from some of the darkest corners a person can stand in. Conviction, homelessness, a young mother on the run, a woman discovering her identity, rebuilding her sense of worth, and rewriting her entire future. This conversation is not just about real estate, it's about resilience. It's about the storms that shape a person and the decisions that ultimately free them. Today, you'll hear a journey that starts in survival and ends in freedom. Wendy, I'm excited to unpack your story. I look forward to getting into it. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I want to jump right into it and then unpack your story. So Take me straight to a moment where everything felt like it was collapsing around you. The moment you look back on and you see it as like the turning point. What was happening internally, not just externally?
Well, I definitely would say the moment I felt everything was collapsing on me was back when I was 18, in the midst of all of this happening. I am on the run. I am alone. I am pregnant. I don't know where I'm going to be tomorrow. I don't know if I will get caught and be in jail. I don't know if they're going to take the baby. I don't know even if the baby is healthy because I have had no prenatal care. I didn't know what later in the day looked like, much less tomorrow. It definitely felt like the walls are caving in. There is no out. There is no good way out of this. That is definitely the scariest time.
And you're somewhere up north in a homeless shelter.
I was in Buffalo, New York at the time. Yeah, trying to get to Canada.
When you revisit that scene in your mind, what emotion do you feel now about that?
It has definitely helped to shape my perspective later in life. In the first few years after, even 5 to 10 years, I didn't see the zero benefit to it, zero purpose in it. It was just a mistake that if I could go back, I would redo over. But now, that in that moment, I can say I've never experienced anything like that, where your freedom is in jeopardy, your child's freedom is in jeopardy, your safety is in jeopardy. So anytime I feel like this has got to be the worst thing ever, or this has got to be the lowest moment, and I go back to that moment, and nothing compares to that time frame in my life.
Towards the end of that sort of rock bottom moment, did you have a feeling that it was the end, or that your life was about to change for the better?
I didn't really see a better yet, because I didn't know, one, if I got caught, that's not going to look good. If I turn myself in, I'm looking at jail time. So I didn't see a better way out. The path of least resistance I came to was turning myself in and hoping that it would be better than the alternative of getting caught or killed. So
when you look at your life today and you wake up in the morning, what does this version of life feel like?
Well, obviously, as everybody else, I still obviously have day-to-day struggles, day-to-day things I stress about, but it pales in comparison to having your safety and the well-being of yourself and your child at risk. So it feels surreal sometimes. Like, I can't believe I wake up and I don't have anywhere I have to be at the moment, or I'm, getting ready to take a trip across the world. Like, how did I get here?
That's what I was going to ask. What's the one thing you can do today that you never would have imagined you would have been able to do back then?
Travel across the world.
Right.
I didn't even think I'd have a passport, they would never give me a passport. But yeah, traveling across the world.
Do you ever find yourself forgetting how far you've come?
Rarely. I really don't. It's always in my mind, and it definitely keeps me grounded, and it has shaped my perspective. So I never really forget those times.
That's good. Let's back up. Let's rewind. Who was Wendy before life forced you to grow up fast? What was your childhood like?
I mean, it was, from the outside looking in, it was probably picture perfect. I lived in a good neighborhood. I went to a good school. I did horseback riding. I played softball. I went on a mission trip when I was like 14. I played piano. I had a good life from what everybody would think. I just felt very disconnected and very alone, and I struggled a lot. My mom and we struggled. I didn't have brothers or sisters, so it was just, I felt really alone.
You used the term disconnected. What did that feel like in a day-to-day moment? Like, what did that feel like for you?
I didn't feel like, I soon realized my mom and I had very different views on life, different values. We just didn't connect. There was no affection. There was no hugs. There was no I love yous. Just, that's not who she was. Probably that's because that's not how she was raised. And so I just felt disconnected, like it was just me, myself, and I.
Did you find connection in friendship or sports or anything else as a child?
It was hard for me making friends, I feel like. I was very shy. I was very introverted. So I think some people took that as standoffish. When I was just deathly afraid of, making friends, of being accepted. So the few friends I had were definitely my saving grace, and they were everything for me. So any conflict with friends or anything like that was really hard.
Right.
So
you mentioned your mother. Where was your father?
My father passed away when I was 5. At least that's the father I always knew of and thought was my father.
Do you have any memories of that, of spending time with him?
Very little. He passed away of cancer, so
Okay.
He was sick for 2 to 3 years before he passed away. And like I said, I was 5, so I don't remember much, just
Right.
bits and pieces of, significant memories here and there.
Was the disconnect, well, I guess you probably don't have many memories before you're 5, but I wonder if like that had anything to do with the disconnect with your mother or the way she acted differently towards you as far as affection and caring and things like that.
I think some of it might have stemmed from the fact that finding out later in life that was not my biological father. I assume maybe there was some resentment there, maybe, or she just struggled with moving past that. But I also feel it's partly in how she was raised. I really never saw between her father and her the same, affection or I love yous and hugs.
Right.
So I think a part of it was just how she was raised.
So have you talked to her about that since then? Like, do you ever go back and have these conversations?
No. My mom passed away in February of 2022.
Okay.
And she had dementia. So I would say she was mid-70s when the dementia kicked in. And prior to that, we never had any of those deep conversations or conversations as to why was it like this or not. We never even had conversations about my heritage.
Right.
Yeah.
And then, so growing up, you mentioned your heritage. What did that feel like for you? What did it mean for you? Because you said like you were somewhat introverted or isolating yourself from friends and you didn't feel connected with your mother. I know that your heritage plays a big role in who you connect with as a child. What did that look like for you in your childhood years and then your teenage years as well?
It does. It plays a big part in, I think it plays a big part in your self-worth and your pride in who you are and where you came from. I felt like I had a hard time making friends because one of the reasons is I wasn't white enough for the white crowd. I wasn't brown enough for the brown crowd. And it was kind of that middle of the road. And I just didn't feel sure of myself. I didn't know where I fit in. I just knew I didn't look like everybody else. And everybody recognized it too, because I got so many questions on what is your nationality? And at first, I would say elementary school to middle school, I would just say white, American. And I would get looks like, she's in denial, or she probably just doesn't want to acknowledge that side of her.
Right.
And it wasn't until later in high school that, sometimes people would ask me and I would just make up something. I would say I was adopted, or I would make up, I used to say Icelandic, because I'm thinking, who's ever really seen anybody from Iceland? But I felt, my mom had blonde hair and blue eyes. She was really my only immediate family. And so I didn't look or resemble anybody else. And that was definitely a struggle of I think a part of my making friends and feeling like I fit in.
Did you, when you were going through specifically like middle and high school, did you have ambitions beyond school of like, this is the college I want to go to and this is what I would want to be when I grow up, or what was your mindset in that
Well,
regard?
it's funny. When I was younger, growing up, I wanted to be a veterinarian.
Okay.
Then I wanted to be in the FBI.
Nice.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I know. So But when I was in high school, I definitely wanted to go to college. I'd been accepted to Radford, Longwood, so I was definitely planning to go to college, and I was planning to major in criminal justice.
Perfect.
Yes. But yeah, I was already accepted and ready to go.
So what was your high school experience like?
It was good. I had my little small group of friends, and it was fine up until my senior year. Midway through my senior year, I would have, graduated perfectly fine. My mom and I had this constant conflict at home, and it got to a point. I remember one day we were in counseling, and we had gone to therapy, and the counselor asked her, "How do you feel about your daughter?" And she couldn't answer, and that just. I think I actually got up and left, and that night is when I left home, and it just made me feel like, regardless of our different views and whatever mistakes I had made or my choices in boyfriends or whatever it is, that she could have at least said, well, I love her, but I don't agree with her. So just her silence just spoke volumes to me.
Yeah, so. It's incredible how impactful those words can be decades later.
Yeah. From
your parent. I understand that.
Yeah. I don't know, it's something about your parents,
Yeah.
Whatever they say, it really holds a lot of weight.
Right. So you're getting decent grades to get accepted into college, right? And you're going to school, like you have at least that part of your future lined out. You clearly, if you're going to counseling or therapy with your mother, like there's clearly issues there that you're trying to work through, but you're still being a relatively at least good enough student to have a future lined out for you. What happened halfway through your senior year?
Well, like I said, that's the night. I was 17. It was right before, I think it was in March, probably right before my 18th birthday.
Okay.
And I decided I was going to run away. I did have a boyfriend, and he didn't live here. He was going to school here. That's how I met him, and then he moved back to Philadelphia. But he had come down to visit that weekend, and I just decided I'm going back with him. And so I just packed some stuff, and that night I left, and instantly the next morning I was like, oh my gosh, what have I done? I got to finish school, like I miss my friends, like what am I doing? And I came home. I ended up living with my psychology teacher, trying to finish school, and it just things with my boyfriend, he had stolen a car. I wasn't aware at the time, but we had stopped. We were with his cousins, and we had stopped at a gas station. I was super tired. I was laying down in the back seat. We took off really fast. They had stolen another car, and now we're on the run. And the muffler fell off of one of them, so we had to pull over. And in that point, police came, so everybody ran. Mm-hmm. And it was a whole. That's where the long journey began. But that's where I stopped going to school because I couldn't go back, and I was too afraid to turn myself in because in my mind I'm thinking, they're not going to believe me. I'm just going to go to jail and probably watch way too much TV. And I just was kind of on the run from there. My boyfriend ended up getting caught, so he was in jail, and I was just out there winging it.
So you mentioned you were living with your psychology teacher. I'm guessing that's sort of like it takes a lot to get to that stage to not live with a parent and live with a teacher. Mm-hmm. And so through this process of now you're in a stolen car, the cops either pull you over or pull over behind the car, everyone runs. I could imagine as a kid, you're thinking everything ends if you get in trouble. Like there is no, like putting your irrational teenage brain in your head, right? That there is no, you're already out of your house. You're already in this predicament with your parents. You're, in this sort of like, trying to figure out your identity as you're growing up and things like that. And now the cops are there, they're in the stolen car, all the friends run. And if you get caught, in my head, it would be like, there's no, like, that's the end.
Yeah,
that
college
is the
is done.
end.
I'm going to jail. It's over. Like, my life is over.
And the only solution is to just not get caught. I mean,
guess
quite frankly.
I mean, I'm sure I wasn't even thinking ahead. I just, in that moment, it was like a day to day, kind of like survival. I'm just not going to get caught. I don't think I was thinking, like, well, what am I going to do? Be on the run the rest of my life? I don't think I thought that far ahead.
Right. Just everyone else is running. You need to run too.
I just ran, and, I later found out I was pregnant. So that just intensified my rationale for not turning myself in,
Right.
not getting caught.
When you ran, what did that physically look like? Like, it's nighttime, you're on the side of the road, are you running through woods and then you're finding some place to go?
It's such a long journey, but in that moment, it was getting dark. Everybody ran. We were right at Dickens Road. There was a baseball field right behind there, and I was with nobody. Everybody scattered. So I walked over to the baseball field. Parents were leaving. A game was finishing up, and all of the police were just, piling down in there. Searchlight helicopters are going. I walked over to one of the police and I asked them what was happening, and he said, it's fine, you'll be okay. I said, I'm waiting for my mom to come pick me up, and what's happening? And he said, it's okay, we're looking for a few people, but you stay here. So I was laying down in the back of the car when the car took off, so I knew they weren't at that moment looking for me, because
Right.
they didn't see me to have reported it. But as soon as they find the cars, they're going to say, I had a lot of stuff. I had yearbooks, albums, pictures, all of that stuff from my psychology teacher's house. And I knew they would find all that stuff and knew I was there. So I walked over to a house, called a friend. They came and got me. Went back to my psychology teacher's house. My boyfriend was there. He had gotten away. His father came and picked us up from North Carolina. We stayed in North Carolina for a couple weeks. My boyfriend ended up getting picked up in North Carolina. Again, they still weren't looking for me yet. They were looking for him. So he got extradited back to Henrico. And from that point on, he's in jail. Now, there is a point during all of this, probably another 2 or 3 weeks later, I got picked up. So I went to jail. Got extradited back to Henrico. I went to jail for about 3 weeks. My mom bailed me out. And at that, I had found out during that time that I was pregnant. And I knew, like, I can't stay here. Like, I have to leave. I can't go back. I can't go to court. I can't, there's no way. And so I ended up taking my car, and that's when I left. And from then on, I'm, like, on the run.
Did you tell anyone that you were leaving?
No, I didn't tell anybody, because I didn't really know who I could trust. I knew my mom had spoken to my 2 close friends about, don't help Wendy. But I just left. And
Did anyone else know you were pregnant?
not at that time, no.
Goodness.
Not yet.
I could
No.
not imagine.
I had written, come to find out, I don't know who I was writing the letter to, but I wrote something, and later my mom found it in my room, and because I would call periodically to talk to her and let her know I'm okay, and she brought it up. She had found something in my room that said I was pregnant, and
I mean, I couldn't even begin to imagine. I mean, in a very normal life, pregnancy is confusing and challenging, and there's, physically very challenging. Obviously, I would never know as a male, but we have a couple of kids, and I've been able to support my wife in a small portion through her pregnancies, but I could not imagine at that age, in those circumstances, having essentially no one on your side, no one that you could trust or really talk to about things very openly, that has your back. Going through this whole thing and then realizing you're pregnant, having to make whatever decision you can make to protect yourself and the baby, or at least, like, that's the right way for you. Like, that's the only path forward. So where did that take you? What did that look like when you I guess you just didn't, you said, hey, I'm just not going to show up to my next court date, right? And so where did you go from there?
it was such a crazy journey that I probably should write it down, because I was back and forth so many times. I first went to North Carolina because that's where I had been. Boyfriend had some friends there. My initial thought was, I'm trying to get the bail money together to get him out. So I have somebody that can help me.
Interesting.
And so I had gone to some of his friends to try to get help. That was disastrous. I ended up coming back to Richmond. I did reach out to some friends at that point for some help. I ended up going back home one day when my mom wasn't there. I guess she was at work. And the locks were changed. The windows were like bolted. and I was trying to get more clothes. And I remember I broke in a window in the back to get inside to get some more clothes. And when I was getting ready to leave, I just happened to walk by the window, and there was a police officer at the corner of the house. And I looked, and there was a police officer at each corner of the house and all down the street. I'm assuming a neighbor called the police. They saw me, breaking in the house. And I was panicked because, I'm definitely going to jail. I've already missed my court date. And I remember the police officer coming through the back door simultaneously saying, they have a dog, I need to come out or the dog's going to bite me. And I was frantically trying to get the bolt out of the window. And as he was coming through the back door, I just jumped through the window and I ran. I ran back to where I had parked my car, which was in a shopping center not too far from there. And I went up the steps to go to my car, and the car was surrounded by police. So, so now I have no car, I have nothing, I have no clothes, I have nothing. And so I walked, in my mind, I should get to another county because they can't, in my mind, I'm thinking they don't have the jurisdiction to come after me. So I ran through the woods and I got to a different county. It borders Henrico and Goochland. And I went in a store and I called my boyfriend's father to see if he would help me. No. So I ended up hitching a ride, and I got out of the area. And from then, I think I went back to North Carolina. I had clothes there, so I was thinking I could at least get some clothes. I didn't stay there very long. This is a very small area in North Carolina. It's Warrenton. So it's a very small, there's like one gas station, all of this. So I had gone to the convenience store, and I guess they called ahead because I'd been there so often that she might show up here.
Interesting.
And the police officer stopped me and asked am I Wendy Robertson? And I'm like, no. And he said, well, I believe you are. We got word that to be on the lookout for you, and it matches your description. I was like, no, I'm actually supposed to be meeting her to pick her up. And I said, can I use the phone and call and see where she is? He's like, okay. So I had no money. I just went to the payphone and acted like I was making a call. He's on the phone and he's walking. As he walks down the side of the building, I just dropped the phone and ran. Yeah. And I run into the woods thinking they're going to have the whole team of police after me, dogs, everything. Nobody ever came. And so I spent the night in this abandoned car. And the next day I walked to a friend's house, and I was exhausted. I mean, I was pregnant, and it's summertime. I get there and he's not there. No one's home but his younger sister, who's probably 12 at the time. And I asked if I could just come in and wait till he got there. She says, sure. I come in and I'm laying on the couch and I fall asleep, and I wake up to somebody tapping my foot. And I wake up and it's the same police officer that I had run from at the convenience store. And he says, well, I found out you are Wendy Robertson and you're going to have to come with me. And so in that moment, I'm like, it's done. Like, there's nothing else I can do. And so I said, okay. And he put me in the police car. He's writing his report or whatever. And I remember feeling so desperate that if it didn't have that gate up, I would have stolen the police car. I was so desperate. So he says he had to go back inside and talk to the father. So the father had come home. I think the girl got scared and probably called her dad. And he was like, call the police. So he went inside to speak to the father. And when he went inside, I rolled the window down in the back because it would roll down, halfway. I rolled the window down and I jumped out. He had never handcuffed me or anything. Wow. And I just ran again. And so now I'm back on the run. And not long after, to be honest, I don't even remember how I got back to Richmond again. And I ended up stealing my own car. And that's when I was like, I'm never going back to North Carolina. I just went up north. I went to Philly. I spent a little bit of time there. And then I ended up in Buffalo, New York. And I think there was one time I went into a hospital and acted like I was having pains just so I could get an ultrasound done to make sure things were okay with the baby. That was probably the extent of the prenatal care. But eating, I mean, I would go in restaurants, I would eat. I'd go to the bathroom and then I would leave.
Right.
I would eat wherever I could, honestly.
First off, your evasive skills are impressive. You should. There should be like some movie on that. That's insane evasive skills. But I wonder. I do wonder, and I can't really put myself in this mindset. I'm not really sure how to get there, but because I'm literally thinking about how incredible your evasive skills are, but in order for that to happen, there needs to be a very high desire to get away. Like,
it's
you should have given up
100%.
18 times and just said like, all right, you got me, but you refuse to let that happen. Sometimes I mentioned like there should be a movie about that, but like sometimes in movies you wonder why the main character or the two characters just don't talk to each other. Why don't they just tell, hey, this is all I'm worried about? Or like, hey, this is it. And then the whole movie would be solved, right? Which is why they don't do it in movies. But it kind of reminds me of this, is like, what was the fear? Where was the mistrust where you could potentially like just say something to an officer or say so? Is it because you didn't have that true connection with friends? You didn't have a true connection with your mother, it sounded like. And so maybe there was this like, you just could not trust anyone. What caused that absolute need to evade?
It's fear. The bottom line is fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of not being able to trust what they're saying is accurate. I do remember at one of the times I spoke with my mom on the phone, and she said, Wendy, if you just turn yourself in, they say they'll work with you. They said that it won't be bad. Just turn yourself in. And this is way before I had even gotten caught the first time.
Right.
And I'm like, yeah, they'll say anything. You know, again, too much TV. Right. They'll say anything just to get me to turn myself in. They don't mean that.
Yeah, which is probably true to some degree.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, you're going to such extent, like, you just breeze through it, but you're like,
the whole situation so much worse.
And you breeze through it, but you're like, I just, spent the night in an abandoned car, and then you move on, right, with your story. That in itself, like, just that night, I could imagine, like, if we just slowed down and talked,
there's so much detail in here. Like, I could talk about this for days, because that one incident, like you said, in the abandoned car it was dark. I couldn't see inside of it. The door just was open, and I was trying to hide, so I got in it. When I slept on and off a little bit, but when I woke up the next morning and I looked, and I am surrounded by spiders and leaves and just I got out of there so fast. And this is something that I think about so often, is when I said I hitchhiked to the other person's house, and it was two men that stopped in a pickup truck, and the one man got out and says, you can slide in. And in that moment, I'm thinking, I shouldn't do this. This is not safe. But again, I was desperate. I was hot. I was exhausted. I got in, so I'm now sitting in between two men, and it's going through my mind, like, am I even going to get out of here? Yeah. And they took me where I needed to go, and he got out, and I got out.
And we still have more to this story about New York and some things that you went through there. But if you could, like, today, talk to yourself back then, would you tell yourself to keep running, or would you say turn yourself in?
No. Things would have been so different had I never left, just faced the music from day one. I probably wouldn't have gotten in any trouble. The whole thing got really blown out of proportion because they thought that this was like a carjacking ring. So this is why they were going so hard. Yeah. But it was just a couple teenagers that had stolen a couple cars, and it wasn't what they thought it was. But I made it so much worse for myself because I've jumped bond. Now I've gone across state lines. I've done so much more that exacerbated the situation. So also, if your story would have been a lot shorter, you wouldn't be the same person you are today. So it's weird that, like, you go through all this pain and trouble, and it just mold you to the success that you've had today and the mindset that you have today. So let's go back to New York. You make it up to New York. Are you still in your first trimester at this point, or like towards the second? So I got up to New York. It had to be probably November because it was cold. It was really cold.
You're in Buffalo.
Like 30 below. It's the coldest place I've ever been in my life, and I've never been back since. It was freezing. Always like 3 feet of snow on the ground at any given time. I don't even know how I ended up in Buffalo, but that's where I was waiting. Like I said, I was going to write to get my birth certificate so I could get across to Canada. I had slept in the car for a couple nights, freezing. I mean, it was freezing, covered in snow, freezing. And one day, a man came over to the car, and I put the window down just enough so I could hear what he was saying. And he said, "Are you homeless?" And I was like, "No." He's like, "Well, if you are, there's a homeless shelter around the corner. You should go there." And I'm thinking, I'm not going to a homeless shelter, but I'd rather sleep in the car. So one more night in the car, and I was like, I'm going to the shelter. So that's when I went to the shelter. It was really nice. It was almost like a hotel. You know, it was great. I had a warm bed to sleep in. They gave you food vouchers to be able to get food. It was great. And I wrote to get my birth certificate. And it's now I was probably there about a month, but it's coming up on, it's probably beginning to mid of December. And I started thinking about, I've always loved Christmas. Like, Christmas is my favorite time of year. And I knew I was fairly far along, probably 7 months-ish. Wow. And it was really weighing on me, like, what am I going to do if I get caught? I can't keep running forever. Like, what is my life going to look like? That's really when I really sat down a minute to think things through. I had just been running and not thinking. And I really was sitting there thinking, what am I going to do if I get caught? They're definitely going to take the baby. I can't even get a job, you know, I can't provide for my baby. And that's when I decided, I called my mom and I told her I was going to turn myself in. And I went home and I stayed at home. I went home on December 24th and I stayed at home until the 26th, and I went to turn myself in.
That's incredible. I mean, you make it that far and you go through all that, and you get up all the way up to Buffalo, New York, and you're staying in a homeless shelter, which is just a wild turn of events. From just months prior, you were thinking about what college you were going to go to, right?
Yeah.
You have this clarity, which actually says a lot, because I think, not to like be insensitive, but to think about like business owners or investors and things like that, we're go, 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 when I think some time to stop and think. I would call it stop the boats, because back when we were in the physical training world, we would do like boat races, and whenever and everyone would just go as hard as they can, and you have 6 people on a boat, and they'd be rowing, and it'd be against the current. And when you're just going and rowing so hard, your boat will just go in circles because your team's not in sync. They're off cadence and things like that. And so I'll use the people on my team will now use the phrase like, hey, we got to stop the boat, because we get so crazy and we're going so hard that we're not thinking, we're not working together as a team. And so we'll just say stop the boat, and that is literally when you stop in the middle of a river, you're going, down, the current's taking you away from your goal, but you still need to stop, and you need to get your team on the same page. You need to think through things, make sure everyone's, rowing together. Now that's a team aspect, but in your case, it's like you were able to stop the boat, and whenever someone would stop the boat, you just go in a straight line afterward. All the other boats are just going in circles and spinning and zigzagging, where you just stop the boat, have that moment of clarity, bring your team together, and you're in a straight line. You'll never lose the race. And you're able to make it that far on that long of a journey while pregnant at that age, and then get to a homeless shelter in Buffalo in the winter and have some clarity there, which is just insane to think about. And so you go home, you spend the holidays with your mother. What was that Christmas like?
I really don't even remember it. I mean, I was a mess. I was scared. Had this looming over me of knowing I'm going to jail and no idea for how long. I don't remember anything about that Christmas, to be honest.
So what happened after you turned yourself in?
I went to jail. That was in Henrico. And so I was in there until, I'd say, mid-March. My daughter was due March 23rd. I didn't have any bond at first, obviously. So the infirmary had reached out to my mother. They were concerned. The baby was small. I wasn't gaining weight. They were concerned. And at that point, I did have bail to see if there was a way that she would consider bailing me out. And she did. And I went home, and Jocelyn was born on March 24th. I had to go back to court May 3rd. And thankfully, I had a good attorney. He got me off with time served. But I did end up having the 2 felonies on my record.
Right.
So... And I had a good amount of time over my head. I was only on probation for a year, which was fine. I mean, I was never a trouble kid, so staying out of trouble was easy for me, especially now I have a child. So I eventually, obviously, I never even finished school, so I got my GED, and then I ended up taking classes at J. Sargent Reynolds. So that was kind of my life. I was living at home with my mom and raising my daughter, going to J. Sargent Reynolds.
What was life like with a felony on your record? Were there some freedoms that you lost that that really were impactful to you, or how did that affect your?
Not necessarily the freedoms. I mean, after that, in my mind, and especially I'm still young, you know, I'm 18, 19 after I had Jocelyn, the losing your right to vote, losing your right to carry a firearm, losing all of that was so insignificant to me. You know, I had my freedom. You know, I could walk the streets. I could go to J. Sargent Reynolds. So everything else was irrelevant. I could care less if I ever got those back. It wasn't until later in life, you know, I ended up getting married. I had other kids. And, you know, the kids would come home because they talk about this in school about, oh, you know, who are you voting for? Did you vote, Mom? Are you going to vote? And of course, I didn't want to be like, well, I can't. So I would kind of fake that conversation. But it started weighing on me the older I got, the more mature I got. And I looked into getting my rights reinstated. You cannot do that while you still have time over your head or if you are still under any kind of probation. Mm-hmm. I had a pretty good amount of time over my head. And it wasn't until, I'm going to say it was like 30 years they gave me over my head. So it wasn't until that expired and I did pursue getting my rights reinstated. So I did get all of my rights reinstated except for the right to carry a firearm. However, I did go and pursue getting my private investigation license. So I was licensed by the Department, which is so wild to me. I was licensed by the Department of Justice to be a private investigator. And not that I needed it, I never carried one. I just wanted to know that I could. Right. I went to petition to have my right to carry a firearm reinstated. Mm-hmm. And I had to go to court for that. And I just explained why I wanted it. I'm a private investigator. And it was like, yep, no problem. Judge was like, yes. So I have all of my rights reinstated at this point.
Yeah, so. That's awesome. You're figuring out motherhood and getting through these legal issues. Do you start to have professional ambition within the next year or two, or like
no.
what is kind of happening at this point?
I think I had kind of mentally checked out from ever thinking I could. I didn't go to college. I'm a single mom, teen mom. I have a record. It wasn't even in my mindset of thinking a career. It was thinking, what is the best hourly paying job I could get? Yeah. And yeah, I don't think I had any ambitions, really. I don't think I had any goals. It was more or less just find the best job I could. And I think because I was young, I wasn't thinking about benefits. I wasn't thinking about any of that stuff. I was literally still somewhat in survival mode. Right. What is the best job I could get without them running my record? Because I don't want to apply for anything too big because that's going to ensue a background check. Yep. And I'm not going to pass that. So I had to stay with the kind of the mid-level, good-paying hourly jobs. It's not going to run a background check. Mm-hmm. So
essentially there's no big future for you. It's just, let's pay the bills, take care of your kid, and then maybe you can rent an apartment or something like that. Mm-hmm. Like there's no big ambition or future at this point. Was there any defining moment or relationship that you had or anything like that started to change that mindset for you to think like, hey, I'm actually able to do more with my life than I think?
You know, it didn't come until much, much later. Honestly, not that long ago, because I mentioned I went to J. Sargent Reynolds. I ended up meeting my husband at J. Sargent Reynolds. We got married and we had 3 kids. Okay. So now I have 4 kids. Mm-hmm. And in that moment, you know, I'm in my 20s. I'm just thinking of, you know, I just want to be the best mom. I want to be a good mom. I want to try to do everything right. I want to be present. I want to be at all their stuff. He worked. We struggled, check to check always, but there was a period of time between my first son and my second son that I was just like a stay-home mom. Not that we could afford it, but when you have that many kids, you can't afford to put them all in daycare anyway. Right. So we just made it work on his income, and you know, I was blessed to be able to have the option to even stay home, even if it was a struggle to be with the kids. So in those years, that was more of my mindset, just kind of being a mom, being a good mom. And it wasn't until probably our marriage ended after about 9 years. And in that moment, it's like, okay, I was working part-time at that time, and I quickly moved into working full-time. Mm-hmm. And that was more of a kind of a career. I was in sales, but it was a good job. I had a lot of flexibility, a lot of freedom. It was a family-owned company. So I kind of worked my way up, and that was, you know, the best job I could have hoped for. Right. So you
have mentioned a few times that you lacked that connection with your own mother. What was the connection like with you and your kids, and how did you try to, like, were you purposely trying to solve, like, to have that connection with your kids that you never got?
Definitely. I remember I was probably 12, sitting on the back porch at home thinking, I can't wait to have kids. Not that I wanted to go get pregnant and have a kid, but I can't wait for the time when I do have kids, because they're going to be somebody that loves me unconditionally. So I couldn't wait for that time to be a mother, but I knew nothing about being a mother. And again, I wasn't raised with that affection and that love. And when I had Jocelyn, it was really hard for me naturally to have that immediate affection. When she was a baby, it was very easy. But as she became a toddler and a little girl, it was a struggle for me to hug her, to just naturally have that affection. But I made it a point to force myself until it became natural. But I remember I felt guilty for feeling like that. I felt like I wasn't a good mom, that I should naturally want to have all the affection and the hugs and the I love yous and all of that. But I had to push through that, because I definitely did not want my kids to be raised not hearing I love you and not being hugged. So.
Right. To bring it back a little bit, you had mentioned that you didn't know about your heritage and you found out later. At what point was that where you figured out more about your father?
I like I said, I always had questions. Actually, not long after Jocelyn was probably 5, and I would go in these periods of down these rabbit holes of trying to figure this out, and I would get nowhere, and then I would just table it for years, and it was resurface. And when Jocelyn was about 5, I was married, and I knew I was born in Georgia, Athens, Georgia, and my mom was a nurse. And I thought that she always used to talk about this doctor that she worked with, and he was a kind man. He was a really good doctor. And I just thought maybe he would have some answers, like he would know something. And so I found him. I made an appointment at his office, and I went down there, and I got nothing. Like, no question. He remembered my mother, but he said the last time he spoke to her was when my father passed away. So I got nowhere. So I kind of tabled that, it drifted off. But then I found later on, my mother didn't have a good relationship with her mother-in-law, who my father's mother. I didn't even know if she was still alive. I remember I ended up asking my aunt, my mother's sister, where is she? Like, can I find her? I thought maybe she would have some answers. And ended up, she lived maybe 6 minutes from me.
Wow.
I had no idea. I'd never seen her my whole life. She didn't come around. Nobody from my dad's side of the family I ever saw. And I just showed up one day and knocked on her door, and she knew exactly who I was. And she told me a whole different story than what I'd ever heard. She said she had tried for years to reach out. She had sent letters and packages, but they were all returned, marked moved, no forwarding address. She didn't know what happened with the relationship with my mom and her. She said after my dad passed away, it was just cut off. And again, I asked her, like, what is their heritage? What is, do we have any Asian, any Hawaiian, anything? She's like, no, there's nothing like that in our family. And she told me some things that, she said, when you were born, a lot of things changed. Like, your mother became very possessive of you. She wouldn't really let any of us hold you, Anyway, that lasted for about a week. My mom found out, that I had been to see her, and that was a whole breakdown. And so I just stopped. I didn't want to upset my mom, and I let it go, and I lost contact with them. So throughout my life in different periods, I would go down these rabbit holes of searching. But it wasn't until I was mid-40s, probably like 45 maybe, I did this DNA test where it just swabs the inside of your cheek to tell you where your DNA is most commonly found. And I got the results back, and I was floored. And everybody, that is so surprising to everybody, because everybody else is like, how could you be surprised? Like, you look in the mirror every day, like, what are you surprised about? But it's one thing to suspect or, make up things in your mind, but it's one thing when you have hardcore facts right in your hand. And I was just hysterical. And I, in my mind in that moment, I said I was just doing it for my own knowledge. I'm not even going to confront my mom because I don't feel like I'm going to get the answers, and it's just going to upset her. But after about 3 days, I couldn't. And so I went over there, and I took the test with me, and it was a lot of questions of who put you up to this, and but never any acknowledgement of what the test actually said. No confirmation of, yes, that's right or anything. It's just a huge argument. And but that was the beginning of me finding out.
How did you eventually find out?
Honed into my investigative skills.
Yeah.
I went back on my rabbit hole, and the same doctor that I had gone to before years ago, I found him again, and I was just going to again see if maybe there's something he remembered, something he hadn't said before. And I called and I said I wanted to come back down there, and he's like, no, I'm going to be out of town. And I hadn't even said when I was coming, and so I thought that's weird. And then he said he had dementia, and I thought, well, okay. So I remembered when I was down there the first time, he had a son, and I remembered it just because he was also a doctor and he had the same name as the dad. And so I found him, and he was in Florida, and I called and I just said, I had some information about my mother, and I didn't know, I think they were pretty close. I didn't know if maybe if he's in good health, if I should call and tell him. And he's like, oh, yeah, he's fine. You should give him a call. So now I'm really confused, but it's not clicking. I don't know why. It's just not, I'm just confused. And a couple days later, I'm standing in the store ready to check out with my groceries, and I'm scrolling on my phone, and I had a message come through on Messenger from somebody totally different that I had not yet had any interaction with. And he lays it all out for me, how we're related through this doctor. He's my half brother, and that's my father. And I mean, hysterical. Like, I just left my cart right in the middle of the floor. Wow. I left, and that doctor that I had been down to see was actually my father.
Wow.
So, yeah.
That is insane to think about. So you've had a few conversations with your father without even knowing he was your father.
Yeah. I just assume that they must have had an agreement back then that they were both married at the time, and he's a doctor, she's a nurse, he's Filipino, she's white. It's 1971. I guess they assumed this is best for both of them, to just have my mom raise me with her husband, and nobody ever has to know. Did
you feel closure after that, or did that open up a can of worms?
I did feel a little bit of closure, because I just never thought I would know why I looked different. I never thought I would know. I thought I felt like my mom knew something, but at that time I didn't even know, am I adopted? What is she hiding?
Right.
But I just thought it's going to die with her. I'll never know. And so just to find out, yes, there was some closure there, but I always want more. I always want to push it further. So.
Right. So you have kids now. You have been through a divorce. What happens after that divorce? Like, where's your mindset go? Like, okay, I'm back to the fight, back to the struggle. What do you do from there?
Back in the struggle, single mom. It was tough. We were very young when we got married. I think I was 22 and he was 20, so it was tough. He took on a ready-made family. I already had Jocelyn. Not too much longer, here we have other kids. So it was a struggle. And when we divorced, it was hard for him to be around and see what he had lost. So he had to, go on his own journey and get himself together. And so it was some years, by myself and figuring things out. My mom did help me a lot.
That's good.
She would watch the kids so I could work and things like that. That was a huge blessing. So, yeah, it was tough. And then I ended up getting remarried probably, I don't know, maybe 5 years later. So.
And was that the point where because I know you guys ended up getting into a sports performance facility from there. Was that the point where you started to feel like, okay, maybe there's because you have this entrepreneur experience, did you start to feel like, okay, I can do something with this? Or was there any of that, or was it just like, okay, we just need to work hard at this gym, do it together as a team, and this is what we'll do?
Pretty much, yeah. I don't think I'd fully, even though we were working for ourselves, I don't think I'd fully stepped into and embraced, because I still felt like I felt like I had a job. I wasn't really an entrepreneur, even though I was. And I felt like what I did, it was more like anybody can do this. It was more, I ran the business end. He worked with the athletes, the trainers, all of that stuff. So I still hadn't really embraced it. This is just the opportunity we were given. Here we are. We're working it. People would see a 17,000 square foot training facility and think, wow, they're doing great. But, we weren't. It was a struggle. We have all these kids, and He also had a daughter. She lived with us. Now we have 5 kids, and it was tough. We were always struggling. And then in 2018, the owner decided he was selling the building, and 2 weeks later, my husband was diagnosed with heart failure.
Wow.
So I was just like, we need to just not try to find another building to outfit. We're not in that position to do that, and you just need to focus on your health, and we'll figure it out. So.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I remember I was coming from the sports performance world, and by all means, you guys were the place to be, right? It had a very good reputation, and you guys were doing a really good job there. What did you learn anything about that business experience of maybe what not to do or what to do as business owners, or something that was surprising to you in that experience?
In hindsight, yes. Looking back, we were owner operators, and we were definitely owner operators.
Right.
There was partly we couldn't afford it, but we didn't have people in place to where, we're just overseeing it and making sure things run smoothly. So the day to day, even on the weekends, I'm doing the schedule, I'm working on, the website, I'm
Right.
doing payroll. If we're on, it was rarely we were on vacation, but there was never a time off, because
Right.
I'm working it. So it scarred me from wanting a brick and mortar. I don't ever want a brick and mortar
Yeah.
after this.
Yeah.
And it was very hard working with your husband.
Right.
I always said 2 things. I don't ever want a brick and mortar, and I don't ever want to work with my husband again.
Yeah.
So I have a little different perspective on things now, but it definitely showed me some things of what not to do and how to do things differently, how to do things better. And if I had the opportunity again, I would definitely do things differently.
Right. So when that winds down, it's not easy to wind something like that down, and now you have to, because your identity is to some extent attached to that business as an owner operator. Once that winds down, how are you feeling? You have these kids, you've lost whatever income that makes, and now are you back to getting another job?
Yeah, I think I was 47 maybe
Okay.
when we closed that, and for me, my identity wasn't attached to it as much as my husband. That was he struggled with that. That was his identity. Myself, I was really just struggling about how are we going to live?
Right.
And I had mentioned earlier, my mom had dementia. At that time, she was in Sunrise assisted living facility. I had her power of attorney as I'm her only child. Not too long after that, we closed in 2018, 2019. So 2020, I think COVID hit. That's when we moved her in with us. So she ended up living there for the next couple of years. But when we closed in 2018, it was more of, okay, let's just figure out I'm going to have to get a job. I don't even have a resume. I've worked myself so long. I don't even know what I would do. What am I even qualified to do? I have no idea. The kids were a little bit older. Some had already gone to college, so we didn't have as many kids there. Figuring out where to go after doing your own thing for so long was mentally challenging, and it was a little scary. 2018 to 2019 is when I decided I've always wanted to do real estate. I always wanted to flip a house. I thought I wanted to flip. But I never thought I could. I knew nothing about real estate. I didn't know anybody in real estate. I didn't have money. My credit wasn't great. And it was just kind of a pipe dream.
Was it just from HGTV, flipping houses looks cool?
It looks
type thing?
it looks cool,
Yeah.
It looks like you can make great money, and I always wanted to do that, but it just wasn't a realistic thing for me. So I had this idea because my credit wasn't great, and at that time I knew nothing of buying properties in an LLC, buying properties outside of FHA conventional loans. But I got a property with using my mom's name, and since I was her power of attorney, just a conventional mortgage. The down payment money I had pulled down from an annuity that she had in order to keep her where she is, thinking when I flipped it, I can just put that money back. And so I got my first property, and that was my first flip. So I was going through that process. I was thinking, to give me more knowledge, I should probably get my real estate license. So I went through that, got my real estate license. That was another thing that was, technically you can't have your real estate license if you have a felony on your record. So they don't let you know until you've taken the class, passed the class, taken the boards, passed the boards, then you can go before the board and see if they'll grant you. So I went through that process. I did get my license, and I'm also starting a new business, which was the Pampered Lotus, doing body contouring. So I have a lot going on, And both of these, being a realtor, as well as the flipping, as well as the body contouring, I'm just starting building this business, getting my certifications, finding a place to do it. I'm not really bringing money in doing all of these things. And so I was working part-time at Target, and that was my life about 5 years ago. So
that's insane. So 5 years ago, at age 47-ish, you're working 3 jobs, have hardly any income, probably more expenses, but trying to get all that stuff off the ground than income, taking care of your mother and taking care of your husband. And you want to flip a house, right? So what was the first deal like? Because I know now that you invest in real estate, right? So you got into real estate at some point. What did that first deal look like, and was it successful?
It was great. It was a house. It was a split level house over off Laburnum, across from White Oak Shopping Center, and I bought that house for $111,000. And the process of the rehab took me longer because I didn't know what I was doing. I basically had one guy helping me. It wasn't any massive amount of work. Spent about, I'd say, $36,000 in the rehab, and it took longer than it should have, but I ended up selling it for $211.
Wow.
And so it went great. But I realized that while that money was helpful, there was no retirement, there's no pension, there's no 401k, there's nothing for later in life.
Right.
And seeing my mom go through all of this, I'm like, what was going to happen to us later? We're going to be living with the kids. So that's when for me, the buy and hold is what I switched over to do.
Where did you find that first deal? Did you have a network at all?
I had a realtor. A realtor, and it was on the MLS. I just found it on the MLS.
Okay. So you knew enough to get a realtor, and then they were able to find you a deal, and that was your first deal.
Yep.
But you certainly weren't in any like real estate networking groups at this point. Like you weren't in the game.
I didn't know anything
level.
About that. Didn't know where to find them.
Right.
I'd listen to Bigger Pockets and
that's a good start,
relentlessly, like to the podcasts, and that's it.
So you did your flip, it worked well, and then you realized you're just giving yourself another job, essentially. I mean, it's good money, but you're giving yourself another job. You knew about the buy and hold game at that point, and then looked in maybe through Bigger Pockets, and then like looked into that.
Right.
How did that look for you?
Right. Yeah. So the next house I got, the majority of the properties I bought early on all came from the MLS.
Cool.
So the next one I found on the MLS, my realtor friend found it, and I was going to flip that one, thinking we need some more cash. But it was down on Cliff Avenue. It was a great area, but it needed considerable work. And in order to really flip it and make the right money, we needed to really do like hardy plank siding. We needed to do it right. And I didn't have that kind of money because I was using, it's funny, my mom's financial advisor, who I had met with prior to, off and on through all of this, he offered to be my private lender. He saw what I did with the flip, and he said, if you ever need someone to fund the money, I'm like, people do that?
Yeah,
that's crazy. So I took the deal to him. He funded the property. It was $160,000, and I had the money from the rehab that I could use for the rehab. From the flip that I could use for the rehab. But it wasn't enough to fix it up the way it would need to be flipped. So that's when I was like, okay, I'm going to pull back, and I will just fix it up good enough and rent it and hold it. So I asked the financial advisor if he's okay with that. If I don't flip it, he's like, well, as long as I get my money back. So I did the cash out refi, and I was able to pay him out. And instead of doing just a single family home, it's a big house, I chopped it up to rooms for rent. And the rooms are huge. So instead of, I probably could have at the time rented that house out for maybe like, I don't know, $1,400 or $1,500 a month, maybe. The rooms for rent, I rent out at $700 a month. So, and it's 5 bedrooms. So that was definitely helping me see how you can cash flow, and you can also build towards retirement through the appreciation.
At this point, are you starting to see the writing on the wall that real estate is pretty like a decent thing to be in if you're building a portfolio?
Yes.
Did you keep the other businesses like the body contouring and everything else?
I did that for a couple of years. I mean, I was working sometimes like 10, 11-hour days. It was just me. My daughter actually ended up taking that business over, and I ended up fast way forward, I had bought a commercial condo over in Mechanicsville. So she runs that business, and she got her esthetician's license. She's completely redone it and renamed it to make it her own thing. So she has the whole top floor of that building.
Awesome.
Running that business. But she's facial, she does everything. She's not just what I was doing. She's expanded it so much. But yeah, I'm still doing the body contouring. I am being a realtor. Luckily, where I have my license, there's no quotas. There's no, you have to come into the office. We have office meetings, et cetera, et cetera. There's no split. So whatever I would sell or, represent somebody on, they just take $99 out of your commission check. Awesome. So I didn't have to do too many deals in order to make a little bit of money. So that was good.
So you just continue building your portfolio. Like, are you still actively flipping or wholesaling or just buying rentals? What are you doing now?
Yep. So a couple of years ago, I transitioned over to doing some private lending.
Okay, cool.
So I really
Awesome.
like that. And that gives me the freedom to travel and do some of the things I like to do without being here. Because I feel like if I have a rehab going on, I need to be here. I've got to oversee it. Even if I had a GC, I need to oversee the GC. Mm-hmm. So I only did that one flip. Everything else I've done has been buy and holds. I buy properties that need work, and I'll do the rehab, do a cash out refi, and hold them as rentals. So most recently, I think it's probably been about 3 months, I got a property that I bought on some creative financing on an option agreement, and that was a good deal. So I am not quite as active. I'm thinking about jumping back into it, kind of miss it. I think I got a little burnout with the rehabs and the contractors and all of that. And I had some that were simultaneous, and they were within hours of each other. So I think I got burnt out with that, but I kind of miss it. So I'm thinking about jumping back into that a little bit, but definitely any deals that come my way, I would definitely move on those, but use them as rentals.
It's just so awesome to see the transition from like all the struggle and adversity that you faced, and then now you're seeing good success in real estate. What would you say to someone who just feels like they're stuck in the past and they can't redefine themselves?
It's hard. Like, that mental block is hard to overcome, and it doesn't matter how many people tell you like, oh, you're great, like you're meant for so much. You've got to really feel it and believe it, and it's something that has to shift inside of you. I saw somebody post something earlier, and they said that they've made so many mistakes that they're trying to make right and to rewrite those. And I thought to myself, we're all human, we make mistakes. It's their intention that matters. I didn't start any of this. I didn't do any of this with the intention to hurt anybody or get in trouble myself. I just, lack of judgment, not thinking, young-minded, just made mistake after mistake. But those had to be there in order to me to learn and grow. Mm-hmm. And you can't be happy without having had sadness, because you wouldn't know what happy felt like.
Right.
You can't, I feel like it would be very hard to have success without having the failures and the struggle, because you wouldn't know what success feels like or looks like. So for me, it somewhat fueled me. It did hold me back for years, because I felt like this is my fault, so this is the best I could ever hope for. Mm-hmm. And it would be almost unreasonable of me to expect anything more. But just, I don't know, later in life, the more work I did on myself and the more I built up my self-worth and the way I viewed myself helped me shift my perspective of the mistakes I made in my past.
You mentioned growing up, you were disconnected to your family, disconnected to the majority of kids at school and things like that. But in the real estate community, you are connected. Like, a lot of people know you, you're highly connected, have a great network around you. How did that start? Because there's a lot of people out there probably just flipping houses and kind of like on an island, right? Mm-hmm. Or buying rentals or whatever, and they don't necessarily have this big network around them. How did that start for you? How did you find yourself in that position?
In 2022, I went to Dealmaker, Jim Ingersoll's group that he puts on annually, and praying nobody would notice me, speak to me, realize I was there. I just sat and just wanted to learn. And during that, Augie Bailat came up to do a presentation on Share the Love. Mm-hmm. And I watched that and I thought, wow, like, that's amazing that you can actually go on these trips and give back and be a part of it versus just writing a check.
Right.
So I went on my first trip in November of 2023, not knowing who else was going. I just thought, I'm going on this trip for me, and I was going by myself. and I didn't know what to expect. And on that trip was Jim Ingersoll and his wife Cheryl that put Dealmaker on. It was your father, Chuck Glover. It was Tim Davis, and it was Randy Horner. And that was it. And of course, Augie. And all of them are in real estate, most of them very seasoned. And when I saw who was there, I was a little intimidated, like, ooh, this may not be for me. And, you know, in those 5 days, hearing other people's stories, hearing how they struggled, how they got started, they just made me feel so welcome and so connected, not even in business, but just personally. Like, they really valued my friendship. They felt like I was, you know, that saying, you know, you find people that can believe in you until you believe in yourself. Mm-hmm. And that's who they were for me. They made me feel like what I was doing was legitimate. Like I was, you know, for years and still I struggle with seeing myself as an investor. You know, I'm not a real estate investor, you know, this is just what I'm doing. But they really helped me to see my worth outside of real estate, just as a person, as a human. And so that was very transformative for me.
It's interesting. I don't know everyone in that group, but I know almost everyone in that group. There's one or two people that I don't know very closely, but or maybe one person that I don't know very closely. But those people have their own struggles, and they have their own stories that get pretty wild that I'm sure you've heard. That, like, it's interesting where I think it's easy to look at a Jim Ingersoll and just be like, all right, well, that guy just crushes, you know, or like a Chuck Glover or something, like, you know, he's probably been doing this for decades, right? Like
my impression of him before I got to know him was this older man. He's probably been in real estate his whole life, probably has a massive portfolio, and he is now just graduated into lending like most seasoned investors end up.
Right.
And then when I heard his story, couldn't have been more wrong. You know, I resonated so much with what he was saying. It still brings me to tears when I think about it, but it shows you that we all have this, and social media doesn't help. You know, social media is the highlight reel.
Right.
It makes you think that everybody is living this great life and they're doing all these deals, or they're just excelling in life, personal, professional, everything. And you're like, I'm struggling, like I'm not like them. But everybody is. That's what you find out. And it's interesting. Like, there are people that will come to me and ask me, when did Chuck give me peak? And I'm like, but for anyone listening who doesn't know, he decided to get into real estate at age 70, which is around the same time when I got in real estate, or whatever age I was. But it was around the same year, and it was because we had talked together about what we were learning about real estate and what we were seeing financially and what it could do for you. So we both entered real estate around 2018, but his life was wildly different, and there was very little future by way of like financial success or friendship, network, things like that. And I've heard his speech, but there's, you know, I get the inside view where there's a lot more to it that, you know, I think it would take a lot longer to share. Same with your story and others, but we all just assume that everyone else, that Wendy is just killing it and it was easy for her, or like, you know, because we see Wendy in this continent or this continent or this, you know, traveling, and people just assume like, oh, she just crushes it, you know, like living her best life.
And you are like, maybe now you are, which is fine, but like, you've earned it, right? And there's been a lot that went into that. And I think that's true with most people. I think most people have a lot of struggles and continue to have struggles mentally, emotionally, physically, that we'll never see, but we just assume that because we have those struggles that we don't deserve that same success, when that person probably has gone through something, maybe some wild story that you can't relate to, but you have your own story or struggles or adversity that you as a human has faced, and so has that other person, you know. And I think we just see it and was like, well, that's not for us because I feel this way or think this way, and that person clearly doesn't. And that's why I think it's really cool that you're taking the time to share your story, where it may, you know, some parts of it may feel uncomfortable, kind of going deep into some of your personal life. But I bet there's people out there that listen to this and they're like, you know, if she can do it, I have a shot, or at least can reach out to you.
I want, because again, social media makes things seem one way and they really aren't. Yeah. And for years, I was super embarrassed, very ashamed about the trouble I got in, just me, myself, everything. And I never wanted to say or do anything that would, embarrass my kids. And so it wasn't until recently that I decided, the kids are grown, they have their own lives, they know. And if my story can help inspire one other person to view themselves differently or feel like anything they may have done in their past doesn't define them, then it's worth talking about.
What does freedom feel like for you today?
Just when you put it in context of not having freedom to me is simple. It's getting up in the morning. It's being able to lay there as long as I want. It's being able to get up and have coffee on the deck. It's, being able to travel with Share the Love. It's literally being able to do those things. I'm not completely financially set to where I want to be, but I'm okay. Compared to where I thought I would be for the rest of my life, I am so blessed. I never thought I would be in this point by myself. When I started with Share the Love, my mom passed away in 2022. My husband and I separated in 2022. And I think that fueled a lot of my traveling. And it's like I found Share the Love in just the right time because I was really struggling. And again, nobody would know. Even right. A couple of my kids were like, Mom, I'm so happy for you. You're just living your best life now. Yep. I was dying inside. Yep. I mean, days I couldn't even get out of the bed. I was dying. And, it was a 20-year relationship that was gone. Yep. And again, you think, okay, well, I'll just go to Jamaica. Things will be so much better. I'll be on the beach. It'll be good. I'll be good. I'll be good there. But who knew your emotions go with you? Yeah. So as much traveling as I did, I'd still had the same, struggle inside. But when I started doing the trips with Share the Love, when you do something for someone else that expects nothing in return from you, it takes you out of your own head. Right. And that is really what helped, along with the camaraderie of the people in the group, the uplifting, the love they pour into you, but just being in that space where you see people that are just, struggling, like can't even imagine their stories, but living by dragging themselves anywhere they need to go, back to a hut with no floor and no running water and no electricity. It makes you put your own life in perspective that whatever we are going through, in any given day here is probably the best day they could ever hope for.
So Share the Love, we've talked about it a few times on this podcast with different guests, but a huge fan of that organization. We'll share a link on the podcast, but Jim Ingersoll was on this podcast and he shared that he was cleaning up boxes from the wheelchairs. And when he was packing them up and they were just going to go find a place to throw them away, but a lot of the locals were running and grabbing the boxes, and he was just like, what are you guys doing? We need to throw these away. And he was like, no, these would be great for our beds. We can make beds out of them.
I was on that trip with him. We were in Nicaragua. That was our first trip.
Yeah, it's just crazy. And that perspective that you get from that is sure, it doesn't diminish any challenges that you faced in life, but it definitely puts it in perspective.
It does.
What do you hope that your kids will learn when they hear your story?
That for themselves, regardless of any mistakes they may have made, that they can always shift and redefine themselves. Anything they experienced or mistakes they made, it does not define who they are. It's never too late to do different things. And just because you may be struggling now, this isn't your life, and it doesn't have to be. Real estate is such an open, even playing field. It doesn't matter your background. It doesn't matter your education. It doesn't matter how much money you have. Those are all myths that you think of that prevent you from getting into real estate investing. But that's why I love real estate investing. It's open to anybody. But for my kids, I want them to, it's easy to say, I don't care what people think about me. But I do, and it's always been a struggle for me of worrying about what people think of me. As I've gotten older, not as much of what people think of me as much as my kids. I always want my kids to be proud of me. And if they learn anything from me is I want them to pull on that resilience and that compassion. not judging others and having compassion and grace for people, because you don't know their situation. You don't know what someone has been through. You don't know what someone is going through in that moment that you might walk past them. So just having compassion and grace for other people.
When I think about your story, I also think of like just the ability to make a decision and keep going. Like there are so many decisions that you made along your journey to keep pushing yourself forward and not giving up, which is insane. It's absolutely insane. Like, and I don't even know all the deal. I mean, I know what I've heard today, but like, again, going back to, my brain just goes back to this. You breeze past, you spent one night in an abandoned car and you're pregnant and you're 17 years old. That is insane. Like, you tell any 17-year-old, much less pregnant, much less on the run, to go sleep in an abandoned car for one night. I could imagine the kind of waking up and kind of like just being unsure of where you are, how safe you are, just that one night out of your entire journey, what went through your head, and like the ability to give up, how many opportunities you had to quit. And then going on through your professional life of having felonies on your record, going through divorce, going through family health issues, owning your own business, and not quitting through that whole journey when there was just so many reasons to along the way. It's just incredible. And now you're successful in real estate. You're traveling. You have a great network around you of people that genuinely care about you and have that connection with them. It's awesome. I love like seeing it from the outside, like hearing the story and then seeing it from the outside, especially seeing you over the past few years and just who you're connected with and what you're doing. Is knowing the story behind it is just incredible. Where can people find you if they want to get in touch with you?
On Facebook, under Wendy Lynn, Lyn. On Instagram, it's Journey with Wendy Lynn. I don't post quite as much on there as I do on Facebook. I'm more active on Facebook. Those are primarily the two platforms I'm on.
What is your daughter's company, if you want to give them a shout out?
Lounge House Aesthetics.
And that's in, where'd you say that was?
It's in Mechanicsville.
Lounge House Aesthetics.
They do facials and body contouring and all that good stuff. She's amazing.
Awesome. Hopefully someone listening to this who needs that can support that company as well. Any final thoughts?
Like I said, I really hope anybody that this interview may find that it inspires them to just keep going and know that there are people out there that care. I love hearing people's stories. I love seeing what people went through and where they are now. So I hope this inspires somebody to never give up on themselves and just keep going.
You are inspiring.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming on the podcast. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you having me. Thank you.